My name is Ethan Parker. I'm 28, and I've always been the outsider in my own family. While my older brother Kyle was the golden child, successful, charming, and always the favorite, I was the one left in the shadows, unnoticed and constantly overshadowed by my stepfather Lucas. Born into a family that valued wealth and status over anything else, I never quite fit the mold. I've spent my life feeling like I was never good enough, like I was just a spare part in a machine that didn't need me. And now, after years of playing the quiet, obedient son, something's happened that has thrown everything into chaos. A secret about my father's, well, that's been buried for years. One that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. I should have never trusted them, but I did. And now, I'm about to find out just how deep the lies go. It's not just about the money. It's about control. The sound of the phone ringing cut through the silence of my cramped apartment. I didn't recognize the number, but a sense of dread pulled at my chest. Without hesitation, I answered. Ethan. My mother's voice, tight and shaky, filled the receiver. We need to talk. Something was wrong. The tone in her voice was the same one she'd had when I was younger, when things had started to unravel with my father. I could feel the anxiety building up inside me. Is everything okay? I asked, trying to hide the edge of panic creeping into my voice. Just come home, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't know how to say this, but they sold the house. Your father's house. It's gone. I froze. The house my father had built from the ground up. The house I grew up in. Gone. Sold? How could that be possible? What do you mean, sold? I gripped the phone tighter, as if it would somehow make the situation clearer. How? Who signed? I don't know, Ethan. But it's done. It's all gone. They've already moved out. I didn't know what was worse. The feeling of betrayal in her voice, or the cold realization that something much deeper was at play. They? I asked, feeling a surge of anger. Who's they, Mom? Lucas, she whispered. And I had no choice. I felt a sharp, icy pain in my chest. Lucas Hale, my stepfather, had been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes for years, always belittling me, telling me I was weak. My mother had defended him every time. You're telling me, I started, my voice shaking, Lucas sold the house without telling me? Without my consent? She didn't answer right away, and the silence between us seemed to stretch for miles. I could almost hear the guilt in her breath. I didn't think it would come to this, she said quietly, but he told me you'd never last a week without us. He said you'd fall apart. I'm sorry, Ethan. I hung up before she could say another word. My mother's silence echoed in my mind as I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but by the time I dropped the phone on the couch and turned away, I could feel the anger rising in my throat. Everything I'd ever known, everything I thought was mine, had just been stolen. And worse, it was all tied to my stepfather's manipulations. He thought he could push me out of the picture, make me disappear. But he hadn't reckoned with me. Not this time. I walked to the window and stared out at the city below. The chaos of the streets, the blaring horns and flashing lights, felt so far removed from the quiet, controlled life I'd tried to lead. They'd sold the house. They'd erased my history, and I wasn't sure if I was more angry or terrified. To a future we can't escape, my father had once said to me, the words now echoing in my head. What did that even mean? I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. I was about to take back control. I would have to dig through the lies, the secrets, and the betrayals they'd buried in the dark for years. There was something buried deep within that house, something my stepfather and mother had never counted on me finding. The question wasn't whether they would regret what they'd done. The question was how far they'd go to stop me from uncovering the truth. I stepped back from the window, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. I didn't plan on going back to that house, but something told me I had to. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the need to confront the betrayal head-on. But I couldn't just sit here and let them destroy everything I had left. I had to go back. As I reached for the door handle, the phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was her again. But I picked it up anyway. This time it was a text. "You'll never find it, Ethan. It's too late." I froze, the words searing through me like a hot knife. Too late? This wasn't just about money. This was something much worse. I didn't know what Lucas had done, but I was going to find out. And then I'd make them regret ever thinking I wouldn't last a week without them. I drove in silence, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The streets blurred by, the familiar lights of the city now distant, fading behind me as if I was already leaving my old life behind. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was from her. But I picked it up anyway. "I hope you're not making a mistake." It was my mother. Her words had the same warning tone she'd always used. But this time it felt different. I wasn't listening anymore. Not to her, not to anyone. I had been keeping a low profile ever since the house had been sold without my consent, quietly sifting through the chaos that followed. But now, everything I had learned in the last 48 hours started to fall into place. Lucas's game wasn't just about money. It was about something deeper. Something that had always been in front of me, yet I never saw it. The file that had been left behind in the house, the file that had been locked away in a drawer I knew Lucas kept his most important documents in. My hand tightened around the wheel as I remembered the flash of recognition when I found it. My father's name on the will. I wasn't just left out of the family fortune. I had been erased from it entirely. I had no claim to anything except the secrets. By the time I arrived at the old house, the sun was already beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. The place had an eerie silence to it now, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I had been here 1,000 times before, but tonight felt different. There was something wrong with the air. I stepped out of the car, feeling my shoes crunch on the gravel, the familiar scent of cedar trees from the backyard pulling me in. My father's favorite tree stood tall in the distance, untouched by time, the only part of this house that hadn't changed. I could already hear voices from inside, muffled, like a distant conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear. With a glance up at the window where I used to sneak peeks into my parents' bedroom, I knew I had to act fast. The door creaked open as I stepped inside. The house was dark, the air heavy with the smell of dust and something stale. The living room still looked the same, furniture arranged just as it had been when my mother insisted on keeping everything in its place after my father's death. But there was no warmth here anymore. I didn't waste time. I went straight for the study. The drawer that had once been my father's secret compartment was now mine to open. The file inside was exactly where I remembered it, tucked between thick legal folders. My breath caught as I pulled it free, my heart pounding with each second. I opened it, and there it was, the original will, and signed by me hidden away. My father's handwritten signature was there, but it wasn't what I was looking for. It was the second page, the clause that left everything to Lucas. I'd barely had time to process the words when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone was outside, closing in. I shoved the will back into the drawer, but I didn't lock it. The footsteps stopped at the front door. I froze. The sound of the door handle turning made my chest tighten. I darted behind the couch, just as the door opened. "Ethan." The voice that called my name made my blood run cold. It was Lucas. I could hear his footsteps as he entered, his shoes scuffing against the floor. "I thought I told you to stay away," he muttered under his breath, clearly not expecting to find anyone here. He sounded angry, but there was something else in his tone, something more calculated. I held my breath, pressing myself deeper into the shadows, praying he wouldn't see me. He didn't. Not yet. "Where are you?" Lucas called out again, stepping further into the room, his voice growing louder. "This isn't your fight. You should have stayed out of it." I could hear the faint buzz of his phone vibrating from his pocket, and then he paused. "That file is mine," he whispered to himself, his voice so low I could barely hear it. "You shouldn't have taken it." I barely breathed. He was talking about the file, the one that proved everything, the one that could tear his whole empire down. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and I jumped back, nearly knocking over a vase. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out everything except the sound of Lucas's footsteps coming closer. "Damn it, Ethan!" he shouted, his face twisted in frustration. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I had no choice. I had to move. I grabbed the file, shoved it in my jacket, and bolted for the back door. My hand brushed the cold doorknob, but I was a second too slow. Lucas grabbed my arm, yanking me back, his grip like iron. "You're not going anywhere," he spat, his breath hot against my ear. But I wasn't backing down. I swung my elbow into his ribs, the sharp pain a warning shot in the fight that was only just beginning. I twisted in his grip, freed my arm, and shoved him back with all the strength I could muster. "Don't touch me again," I snarled. My pulse was racing, my breath short, and for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't that weak kid anymore. The one they ignored, the one they thought they could push around. No, now, it was their turn to be afraid. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. The file was still in my jacket. The truth was still buried in the pages, and I was getting closer to uncovering the full extent of their betrayal. But what I didn't know was that Lucas wasn't the only one trying to stop me. The walls were closing in faster than I could outrun them. And the truth I thought would set me free, it might just be the one thing that would destroy me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The file burned a hole in my jacket pocket, its secrets gnawing at me, refusing to let go. I had barely registered the drive back to the city. The eerie calm of the house I used to call home, now reduced to a hollow shell of betrayal. The truth was still buried in that file, the second page of my father's will. But it was too dangerous to confront Lucas now. I needed to think, to plan. They thought I wouldn't last a week without them, that I'd fold under pressure. But there was one thing they didn't understand about me. I had always played the part of the fool, the easy target. Now, it was their turn to underestimate me. The morning came far too quickly. The dim light filtered through the blinds of my apartment, casting long shadows across the room. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from someone I didn't expect. Allison, my old friend, the only one who seemed to ever see the real me. She worked in corporate law, and I'd always trusted her, even when I had no one else to turn to. "I found something. You need to meet. Tonight, 8 p.m., the usual place." I didn't question her. There was no need to. Allison had always been one step ahead, and I knew she wouldn't have contacted me unless something was important. But the sense of dread in my stomach twisted tighter. What was she going to tell me? Had she found something about the file? Or worse, had she found something about my stepfather? I arrived at the bar just before 8, my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped through the heavy glass door. The faint smell of whiskey and smoke hit me as soon as I entered, the dim lights flickering above. Allison sat at the back booth, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders, her expression unreadable. She was waiting for me, a glass of water in front of her, but she hadn't taken a sip. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat opposite her. I didn't wait for her to speak. "What did you find?" Allison took a deep breath, glancing around the room as if she expected someone to overhear us. "I've been digging, Ethan," she said, quietly leaning in. "There's something you need to see. Something you won't want to believe." She pulled a file from her bag and slid it across the table. My pulse raced as I reached for it. There, in black and white, was the very thing I had feared, the proof that everything I thought I knew was wrong. It wasn't just the will. It was the trust, the one Lucas had been hiding from me. I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the document. The trust was set up years ago, just after my father's death, and it had been carefully constructed to ensure that everything went to Lucas, bypassing me completely. I could feel my breath catch in my throat as the word sunk in. This wasn't just a case of inheritance. This was premeditated, cold-blooded manipulation. Allison's voice broke through my thoughts. But it's worse than you think, Ethan. You're not the only one left in the dark about this. There's a bigger game being played. I looked up at her, confusion flashing across my face. Who else? I whispered. She hesitated, eyes darting nervously. I don't know all the details, but Lucas has been working with someone. Someone from outside the family. Someone connected to your mother's past. My blood ran cold. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal from Lucas anymore. There was someone else involved. Someone who knew everything about my family. Every secret, every weak point, and they were pulling the strings from the shadows. I shoved the file back into the bag, the anger rising in my chest again. This wasn't just about money. This was personal. They'd taken everything, my father's legacy, my sense of belonging, and now they were going to pay. Do you want me to help you? Allison's voice was soft, but there was an edge of steel behind it. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I'd known. She was different now, sharper, more determined. And I knew then that I couldn't do this alone. You're damn right I need your help, I said, my voice hoarse. But we're going to need more than just paperwork and secrets. We need to expose them. All of them. We spent the next hour in the dim light of the booth, making plans. I knew I had to act fast. Lucas was dangerous. And this shadowy figure lurking behind him? Even worse. They had made their move, and now it was my turn. But it was clear from the look in Allison's eyes that this wasn't going to be easy. The stakes were much higher than I'd realized. The file wasn't just the beginning. The deeper I went, the darker it got. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I was fighting for my life. I left the bar feeling more unsettled than ever. I needed to get to the bottom of this. But I had no idea just how deep the hole went. It wasn't just about exposing Lucas. It was about finding out who was pulling his strings. And more importantly, why. I got in my car, my hand still trembling from the adrenaline. As I started the engine, the phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. You're getting closer, Ethan, but you won't make it out unscathed. Keep digging, and I'll be waiting. The message sent a chill down my spine. I had no idea who this was, but one thing was clear. Someone was watching me. Someone who wanted me to uncover the truth. But at what cost? I gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles white. The walls were closing in, and I was running out of time. I pulled into my parking spot, the cold night air seeping in through the cracked window. As I stepped out, a shadow moved in the distance. A figure, too tall to be anyone I knew, standing at the corner of the street, watching, waiting. For a second, I thought about turning around, running, but I didn't. Instead, I walked toward the door, the weight of the file heavy in my jacket pocket, the secret threatening to consume me. And then I heard the footsteps behind me. They were getting closer. I didn't know who was more dangerous. Lucas, with his cold manipulation and endless lies, or the unseen force lurking just behind him. The night was too quiet, too still. As I walked into my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just the file in my pocket, the evidence that had changed everything. It was the weight of the decisions I was about to make. Allison had given me a way forward, but at what cost? I pulled out the file again, my hand shaking. There it was, the bombshell I'd been expecting, but never quite prepared for. My mother's name on the trust document. Not just as a passive beneficiary, but as a co-conspirator. Her signature alongside Lucas's. The realization hit like a freight train. She had known. She had known everything. And yet, she had stayed silent. I slammed the file shut. She had always been my protector, my ally in this twisted game. To think she was part of it, Part of the betrayal was too much to bear. But there it was in black and white, her complicity. The ringing of my phone broke the silence. Allison. Ethan, I think I've got something else for you. Her voice was urgent, but it didn't mask the underlying tremor. She knew the game we were playing had just escalated. I rubbed my eyes, the exhaustion threatening to take over. What is it? It's not just your mother, Allison said. I've been digging deeper. This goes beyond family. There's a third party, Ethan. Someone outside the circle. Someone you would never expect. My heart skipped a beat. A third party. Who else could be involved in this mess? What are you talking about? I asked, my voice tight. There's a contact. Someone your mother has been in touch with for years. I tracked some of the communications. It's a business partner, not just anyone. They've been working together for years, pooling resources to control assets that should have been yours. The words hung in the air, making my blood run cold. Who else could be pulling the strings? Who? I asked, the question almost pleading. She hesitated before replying. A man named Victor McAllister, a financial consultant. He's been involved in several high-profile cases, some of which didn't end well. He's been part of your mother's schemes. I found his name on a file, Ethan, but he's more than just a business partner. He's connected to Lucas in ways that are just beginning to surface. Victor McAllister. The name felt foreign on my tongue, but it triggered something inside me, a memory I hadn't quite pieced together. I remembered my mother's hushed conversations, late nights, always cutting off the line when I entered the room. It was as if she feared something or someone. I stood up, pacing back and forth. There was too much at stake now. Too many pieces moving in the shadows. I needed answers. I'll meet you tomorrow. Tell me everything you have on him, I said, my voice firm. Allison agreed, her voice quieter. Ethan, this is bigger than you think. Be careful. McAllister is dangerous. He's got connections that go all the way to the top. And if your mother was working with him. I cut her off. I know. I'll be careful. I hung up, the weight of the words hanging in the air. There was no turning back now. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't what I'd expected. There was a much larger game being played, and I was just one pawn in it. The next day, Allison and I met at the usual spot, a cafe that had become our base of operations over the past few weeks. I sat across from her, watching her as she sifted through the documents she had prepared. She handed me a folder with a thick stack of papers. Victor McAllister's background, she said. I've got everything from his business dealings to his personal life. His connections with your mother are clear, but there's more. He's involved in a larger network. People you won't believe. I opened the folder, scanning through the pages. There it was, McAllister's name listed in connection with several shady deals, offshore accounts, and most troubling of all, a string of clients whose financial losses had been swept under the rug. This wasn't just a businessman. He was a fixer. Someone who made problems disappear, no questions asked. But what caught my eye were the records detailing meetings with my mother. They weren't just business-related. They were personal. And one of them had taken place just weeks before she died. I felt the ground slip from beneath me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated move. My mother had been part of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. Ethan, Allison's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. We need to confront him. But be prepared. He's dangerous. I nodded, my jaw clenched. I'm not backing down. Later that evening, I found myself standing outside McAllister's office building, the cold night air biting at my skin. The city was alive with the hum of distant traffic, the bright lights reflecting off the glass and steel of the towering buildings. But here, in the shadows, it felt different. Silent, like a predator waiting to pounce. I walked up to the entrance, each step heavier than the last. The door slid open, and I stepped into the lobby. The receptionist barely glanced up as I approached. I need to see Victor McAllister, I said, my voice low but firm. She picked up the phone, but before she could dial, a voice interrupted from behind me. "Mr. McAllister is expecting you." I turned around, my heart racing. A tall man in a dark suit stood in the doorway, his cold, calculating eyes scanning me. "Follow me," he said. I had no choice but to comply. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just a meeting. It was a trap, but I couldn't back down now. I had to face him, the man who had been pulling the strings, the man who had helped destroy everything I knew. As I followed the man down the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every step seemed to echo in the silence, a slow march toward my destiny. And as the door to McAllister's office creaked open, I knew this was where everything would change. The room was dimly lit, with only a few lamps casting shadows across the walls. McAllister sat behind a large mahogany desk, his face expressionless. "I've been expecting you," he said, his voice like gravel. I stepped forward, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You've been expecting me?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We've been expecting you for a long time, Ethan." The door clicked shut behind me. And that's when I knew I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I was fighting for my life. The weight of the situation crushed me as I sat across from Victor McAllister. His cold eyes scanned me, calculating every move, every word. I had hoped for answers. Instead, I was walking into a trap I didn't fully understand yet. "You're either brave or foolish to come here, Ethan," Victor said, his voice low, almost amused. He sat back in his chair, fingers drumming on the mahogany desk. The room smelled of cigar smoke and polished leather, the air thick with tension. "What do you think you're going to achieve?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I'm here for the truth, Victor, and it's high time you gave it to me." He smirked, leaning forward. "You think you're in control of this situation, don't you?" His voice dropped to a whisper, the words hanging in the air like poison. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. You're just a pawn in a game much larger than you could ever imagine." I clenched my fists under the table. His words, his confidence, it was all too much. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. I could feel my pulse racing, blood pounding in my ears. But I refused to show fear. Not now. Not when I was so close. "The truth," I said, biting off the words. "What are you hiding, McAllister? What's your connection to my mother? To Lucas? You're all part of the same mess. But why? What's the endgame here?" Victor leaned back, crossing his arms. "Endgame? You really think you have the slightest clue, don't you?" His eyes glittered, dangerous and cold. "You're in over your head, Ethan. Your mother, Lucas, they've been playing you, like a violin. All this time, you've been so sure you're the victim, but you've been the tool all along." I felt a chill run down my spine. A tool? No, it couldn't be. Not me. "You think I'm your enemy?" I shot back, trying to hold my ground. "I'm not the one who's been pulling the strings. You're the one behind this. You're the one who's been orchestrating everything from the shadows." Victor's smile twisted into something far darker. "Maybe. Maybe not. But you've been too busy looking at the wrong players. The truth about your mother, your trust, the assets, it's not about Lucas. It's about something far bigger. Something that will destroy you once and for all." I felt my chest tighten. He was toying with me, but his words kept nagging at me. What could he possibly mean? What was this something bigger? What was the true extent of the game I was caught in? Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted the moment. A man in a suit entered, his face unfamiliar, but his presence somehow unsettling. "Sir, we have a situation," the man said, his voice terse. Victor's gaze never left me as he motioned for the man to speak. The tension in the room escalated. "What's going on?" Victor asked, his calm demeanor slipping slightly. The man stepped closer, leaning in to whisper something in Victor's ear. The words must have been bad, because I saw the first crack in Victor's composed facade. His eyes darkened. His fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. "I'm afraid you'll have to leave, Ethan," Victor said, his voice losing all warmth. "Our conversation is over for now." I stood, hesitating for just a second. "What's happening, Victor?" I demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" Victor didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to the man by the door, signaling that my time was up. But as the man stepped forward to escort me out, something in his face caught my attention. A flicker of recognition. "Wait," I said, my voice sharp. I turned to face Victor one last time. "You don't get to dismiss me. Not when I'm this close." Victor's expression was unreadable, but I could see the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. He had more to say, I could feel it. He knew more than he was letting on. But I wasn't done. Not yet. As the man reached for my arm, I yanked away. "You're not getting away with this," I spat. "I'll expose you. Both of you. This isn't over." Victor's lip curled in a sneer. "You really think you have the power to do that? What are you going to expose, Ethan? Your mother's secrets? Or mine?" He stood, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. "This isn't a game. You're not the one who holds the cards anymore." I stormed out of the office, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The lobby felt colder than before, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I needed to leave now, but my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to check the message. It was from Allison. "Ethan, it's worse than we thought. McAllister's connected to everything. There's a hidden clause in your mother's will. You need to act fast. I'm sending you the documents now. Don't trust anyone, not even your own family." My stomach dropped. A hidden clause? What was she talking about? And why hadn't I been told about it earlier? I shoved my phone back into my pocket, the weight of her message pressing down on me. As I stepped into the elevator, the feeling of being watched returned. My skin prickled, and I turned my head to scan the lobby. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but I knew better now. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. The elevator doors slid shut, but the tension didn't fade. It grew, thickening in the air like smoke. I could feel it closing in. Every step I took was one closer to unraveling everything. But with each step, the danger grew more real. I reached the bottom floor and stepped into the parking garage, my mind racing with questions. Who else was involved? What had my mother hidden from me? Before I could reach my car, a figure appeared from the shadows. I froze. It was the man who had escorted me out of McAllister's office. He was holding something in his hand, a folder. My heart skipped a beat. "Looking for this?" he asked, holding it up. I didn't respond. My instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity held me in place. The man stepped closer, the coldness in his eyes unmistakable. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice low. "But if you want the truth, you need to come with me." And just like that, everything shifted. The world around me tilted. The air was heavy, thick with tension and unanswered questions. My mind was still reeling from the shocking revelations, each piece of the puzzle falling into place, but leaving an even more complex picture in its wake. I walked into the dimly lit room, the sound of my footsteps echoing as I approached the table where the folder was placed. The man who had handed it to me earlier was gone, leaving only a note behind. The flickering overhead light buzzed, a constant reminder that nothing felt stable anymore. I opened the folder with trembling hands, my pulse pounding in my ears. The documents were old, worn at the edges and covered with smudges of ink. But one thing stood out. 2 words on the last page, written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. "Trust is everything." I froze. I had seen this phrase before, on her last letter to me, the one I thought had been a simple farewell. But now it felt like a warning. A revelation I wasn't ready for. The papers outlined her intentions with a clarity that left no room for doubt. She had known everything. Every step, every manipulation. And yet, she had protected me until the very end. A soft knock on the door startled me, and I looked up. Allison entered quietly, her expression unreadable. She stepped toward the table and placed her hand gently on the edge of the folder. "You found it, didn't you?" I nodded slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. How could she keep this from me? Why didn't she tell me the truth? Allison's eyes softened, but there was something in them that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Your mother, she loved you too much to pull you into this. She didn't want you to bear the weight of it. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. For years, I had thought I was just another pawn in a game I didn't understand. But now, I was learning that the game had been designed for me to win all along. Or perhaps to lose. The truth about the hidden clauses in my mother's will, the power struggles, the lies, it was all there in black and white. She had been protecting me from something far worse than I ever imagined. I glanced at Allison. She had been by my side through this madness, but her sudden silence told me she was hiding something, too. I don't know who to trust anymore, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. The feeling of being watched, the constant surveillance, it all made sense now. There's something bigger going on. Someone is playing us all. Allison hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the door. You're right, and you're not the only one being watched. Before I could respond, the door swung open with a sharp creak. Victor McAllister entered, his presence commanding the room. He didn't even look at me at first, his eyes fixed on Allison. His smirk deepened when he saw the folder. You didn't think I'd let you walk away with that, did you, Ethan? Victor's voice was cold, like ice breaking. I stood up, fury bubbling within me. This ends today, Victor. He chuckled darkly, the sound of it cutting through the air like a knife. Do you really think you're in control here? Do you think you have the power to take me down? He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're nothing but a boy playing at a game he doesn't understand. My hands clenched at my sides. The anger that had been simmering for so long was now boiling over. I wanted to break free from all the lies, to confront the man who had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. But then, something unexpected happened. Allison moved in front of me, blocking my path. Her body tensed, her hand subtly reaching into her pocket. You don't want to do this, Victor, she said, her voice low but firm. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about power, and you've lost it. Victor's eyes flicked to her, confusion flashing for the briefest moment. Then, a realization seemed to dawn on him. He took a step back, his smirk faltering. Allison, I asked, barely able to comprehend the shift. What are you? Just stay out of this, Ethan, she interrupted, her voice hardening. She turned to face Victor, her posture rigid with purpose. This was never about you. It was always about her. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. The game had never been about me. It had always been about my mother, her legacy, her hidden power, and the secrets she had kept to protect me. Victor's smile faltered as he processed Allison's words. You think you've won, he sneered. This changes nothing. You're just another piece of the puzzle. But Allison's eyes were sharp. No, this is where it ends. In that moment, everything seemed to shift. Allison was no longer the ally I had trusted. She was something more. And the realization that she had known far more than she had ever let on struck me like a punch to the gut. She had been playing the game, too. Victor's demeanor changed. The confidence he had once exuded began to crack, revealing the raw panic that had been building underneath. He made a move to leave, but Allison's next words froze him in his tracks. You won't get away with it, she said, her voice laced with finality. The truth is already out, and now it's a matter of who gets to control it. Victor stood still, calculating, his face twisted in disbelief. But I could see it, his facade crumbling. He had underestimated her, just as he had underestimated me. Allison turned to me, her expression softening for the first time. "It's over, Ethan. You don't have to fight this battle alone anymore. But you need to make the right choice. There's still a future for you if you take it." For a moment, everything was silent. I could feel the weight of the choices I had made, the consequences of the secrets I had uncovered. But in that silence, something became clear. I wasn't a victim anymore. I had the power to shape my future. "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling strange on my tongue. The past was over, but the truth had finally set me free. Victor's retreating figure vanished into the shadows, and for the first time in years I could breathe. As I walked out of the building, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me. The lies, the betrayal, the darkness, they were all behind me now. I had faced it all and survived. And in the end, I realized the most important lesson. The truth, no matter how ugly, would always come to light. It was a force more powerful than any lie, any betrayal. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. The only way forward was through, and I would walk that path, no longer a pawn, but a man who had reclaimed his life. The door slammed shut behind me, but this time it wasn't the sound of closing doors. It was the sound of freedom,